So you've got Apple, Samsung, and Nike, three of the biggest companies on the planet. They're all making the exact same massive bet on the future of manufacturing. But here's the kicker. They're choosing Vietnam over India. Why? Well, there's a $96 billion reason, and it uncovers a truth about the global economy that, frankly, most people are completely missing. All right, let's get right into it. That number, $96 billion, that's the key to this whole story. It's what we call foreign direct investment, or FDI. Now, that's just a fancy way of saying it's the money that companies from one country are spending to build actual things, like factories, in another. This isn't just stock market speculation. This is the smart money. It tells you exactly where the biggest players in the world think the real future is. So here's the central question we're tackling today. In this huge race to become the next China, the next world's factory, where is all that money actually going? Is it following the headlines and the hype, or is it telling a completely different story? You've got India, the obvious giant in waiting, on one side, and on the other, you have this quiet powerhouse, Vietnam. I promise you, the answer is not what you think. Okay, let's talk about India's big promise. For years, the story has been super clear, right? As companies desperately search for alternatives to China, India looks like the heir apparent. It's the one that's supposed to take over the manufacturing throne. I mean, it's the story we've all heard a million times, and honestly, on the surface, it makes a ton of sense. And when you look at the stats, the case for India is just massive. You've got the whole China plus one strategy, where every company is trying to de-risk and find a second home for their manufacturing. The Indian government has rolled out these huge initiatives like Make in India and the Production-Linked Incentive Scheme, which basically just means they're handing out cash to companies that build stuff there. And the biggest ace up their sleeve? A massive young workforce that's only getting bigger. It's an incredible pitch. And look, the world absolutely heard the message loud and clear. The political will, the grand vision, it was all there. But when it came time to actually sign the checks and start pouring concrete for these new mega factories, the companies, well, they started voting with their dollars. And that's where we start to see this huge gap between the promise and the reality. And there is no better example of this gap than Apple. I mean, they're the most powerful, most demanding company in the entire global supply chain. What happened to them in India really pulls back the curtain on just how difficult it is to build a high-tech manufacturing world from the ground up. We're not talking about little hiccups here. These were major shocks to the system. You had the Wistron riot back in 2020, where a dispute over wages led to $7 million in damages at an iPhone factory. Apple had to put the whole place on probation. But then it got even crazier. Beijing played some serious geopolitical hardball. They straight up recalled more than 300 of their most critical Foxconn engineers from India, and then just sat on crucial equipment shipments from their ports for months. This wasn't an accident. This was a targeted attack. And this right here shows you the day-to-day operational nightmare. When one of their Indian partners started making iPhone casings, the rejection rate was a staggering 50%. Think about that. For every 2 casings they made, 1 had to be thrown in the trash. Now compare that to Vietnam's established ecosystem, where the same kinds of parts have a rejection rate of like 5 to 7%. It just goes to show you the level of perfection that Apple demands and how incredibly hard that is to replicate. And the investigation into that riot revealed something really telling. It wasn't just some random act of violence. The root cause was a deep structural failure. A software glitch buried in India's complicated contractor system meant workers literally didn't get paid for over 6 months. Now, if you're a company like Apple, obsessed with control and perfection, that kind of risk, that's a giant flashing red light. So, quick question for you. After hearing all this, do you think Apple will ever move its premium iPhone production, like the Pro models, to India? Let me know what you think down in the comments. I'm really curious to see the consensus on this. So Apple's story really paints a picture of the struggle. And that struggle is perfectly reflected in the hard numbers, where that smart money is actually flowing. Which brings us back to the $96 billion twist. Just look at this. This is the FDI, that smart money, going only into manufacturing from 2020 to 2024. On the one side, you have Vietnam attracting nearly $96 billion, and on the other, India pulling in about $85 billion. Now remember, Vietnam's entire economy is about 7 times smaller than India's. A tiny country is not just punching above its weight, it's straight up winning the fight. But it gets even crazier when you look at where that money goes inside the country. In Vietnam, more than 81% of all that investment cash is laser-focused on one single thing: manufacturing. That's it. In India, it's more like 40 to 45%, with the rest spread out everywhere else. So Vietnam isn't just winning the money game, it has a crystal clear, ruthlessly effective strategy.
And this isn't some new trend. Samsung has been doing this for years, pouring in over $20 billion. Today, they make half of all their phones globally in Vietnam. Get this, Samsung sales alone make up almost 28% of Vietnam's entire GDP. It's mind-boggling. Same story with Nike. Over half their shoes come from Vietnam. This isn't a test run. This is a deep, long-term marriage.
So what's the big picture here? It's not a simple story of China is out, India is in. Not at all. What we're actually seeing is the birth of a new, much more sophisticated, three-tier global supply chain. Let's break down what this new world order actually looks like. All right, here's the new reality in 3 simple tiers. Tier 1, that's still China. But here's the thing. China isn't losing manufacturing, it's strategically upgrading. It's letting go of the cheap, basic assembly stuff to completely dominate the high-value crown jewels. We're talking semiconductors, electric vehicles, batteries, advanced robotics. Now, that brings us to Tier 2, Vietnam. Vietnam is absolutely winning the fight for the middle ground, the complex assembly work that China is leaving behind. Think smartphones, electronics, branded clothing. And that leaves Tier 3. This is where countries like India are currently competing for the lower value stuff, basic textiles, simple components. It's not a criticism, just a different stage in the game. And this table shows you exactly why this is happening. It all comes down to efficiency. In Vietnam, you can get your product from the factory floor to a shipping port in less than a day. In India, that can take up to 10 days. Want to start a new business? 3 to 6 months in Vietnam, double that in India. The takeaway is simple but powerful. In today's world, speed and reliability are way more important than just cheap labor. That is why Vietnam is owning that crucial middle tier. But, and this is a huge but, this race is so from over. We have to think of this as a marathon, not a sprint. The country that's leading the pack right now might not be the one that crosses the finish line first in 10 years. See, Vietnam is absolutely crushing it right now, but it's running up against a hard ceiling. It's a small country, only 100 million people, and its workforce is actually getting older and will start shrinking after 2030. They're running out of land and resources. India, on the other hand, has almost unlimited potential. We're talking 1.4 billion people, a demographic jackpot with 60 million new workers joining the workforce by 2030, a gigantic domestic market, and growing research capabilities. To put it simply, Vietnam's strengths are for today, India's strengths are for tomorrow. So, what does this all mean for you? Well, if you're an investor, the real play in India might not be the big brand names, but the companies fixing these problems, the logistics firms, the infrastructure builders. For all of us as consumers, Vietnam's efficiency means the phone or laptop you buy is probably cheaper and gets to you faster. And on the world stage, the big lesson is this: the idea of one single world's factory is dead. The future is a messy, complicated, but much more resilient supply chain spread across many countries. Hey, if you're getting value out of deep dives like this and want to support independent research, you can buy me a coffee. The link's right down below. It seriously helps me keep making these explainers for you. And that brings us to the final multi-billion-dollar question. We've seen Vietnam's incredible speed and efficiency today versus India's absolutely massive raw potential for tomorrow. It really is the classic showdown, the nimble sprinter versus the powerful marathon runner. It's wild, but something like 99% of people who watch these breakdowns don't subscribe. If you want more explainers on the supply chain battles between India, China, and Vietnam, hitting that subscribe button is genuinely the best way to make that happen. And now I want to hear from you. Drop it in the comments below. Who wins the next decade? Thanks for tuning in.